Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and today I'm going to be talking about the changes that are going to be made to outposts, more specifically their removal, and how I think this is going to affect the overall meta of EVE Online, and more specifically why I think there's going to be a war in the near future as a result of these changes. However, before I get into that, I'd like to make a quick disclaimer, and that's that unlike a lot of the other works I've done, I don't really have any evidence for this. It is almost entirely just speculation and looking at the way things like this have gone in the past. In fact, let me get properly attired. There we are. Now the GIA can't steal my brainwaves. But if you've been living under a rock and you're not entirely sure what CCP has planned for outposts, allow me to hand you over to CCP Fozzie as I brutally lobotomise his presentation to give you the cliff notes of what they do have planned.
So Upwell is going to be offering a very exclusive program here that I think a lot of people are going to want to take advantage of. There's going to be 5 new faction citadels, 1 for each outpost type and 1 for conquerable stations. They're like the Alliance tournament ship of citadels. These are going to belong on patch day to the owner of the outpost or conquerable station right before the patch. So if your corporation controls the outpost, then when patch day happens, your corporation will own a new citadel in space near where the outpost used to be. The only way to get them is going to be as part of this transition event. And on the transition day, we'll be moving everything over. You can decide whether you want to take this new citadel that you got from a structure you owned, from an outpost you owned or conquerable, and take it down and then sell it to maybe a wormholer that wants to use it there, or to a collector that wants to have it in their collection, or just deploy them all into one system to be super defensive.
So, what we're looking at here is CCP putting new objectives on the map for coalitions to take, as outposts are no longer simply bumps in the road to invasions or a part of the landscape to be utilised, but in fact simply dormant gold mines that come winter are going to be worth a lot of money. And to demonstrate just how much money is being put on the line here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through 3 different examples and kind of use that to show the price tag that's being put on these previously neutral and, for the most part, unwanted regions that the 4 identified major meta entities might wish to go to war over. And here's where the speculation gets really, well, speculative. First off, I've got to try and figure out what I think the lowest possible price point for a faction Fortizar is going to be. And for me, this sits at roughly 3 times the cost of a regular Fortizar. The actual reasoning behind that is fairly tenuous. It's effectively from where pirate battleships used to sit in relation to T1 battleships back in 2013-2014, as in roughly 3 times the cost for 1.5 times the effectiveness. So one can think of this as where a Fortizar would sit if market forces weren't affecting it in terms of scarcity. From here, however, we basically have license to go completely hog wild with attaching numbers to this structure, as anything beyond this point is going to be people who want to own it either as an investment, as speculation, or simply to say that they own one, which, as CCP Fozzie said during his presentation, is something we can use to draw comparisons between these new Fortizars and Alliance tournament ships. As such, I'm going to set the mid-price as that of a AT ship, which is not particularly tournament or TQ viable. Good examples of this price range include the Cadiz and the Murmur. Ships that are interesting, unique, very collectible, but you aren't going to see them rock the AT scene and become a cornerstone of the meta anytime soon. The kind of ship people have to use once or twice to get on a few shiny kill mails and then just smug to all their friends about how rich they are. Everyone knows one of those people. And then finally, we look at what the highest possible value the market might be able to sustain for these things. I personally think prices like this are going to require some form of mistake on CCP's part, making the stats just incredibly good or making the Vuln window incredibly small, but it could happen. And in order to peg this price point, what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at an AT ship that is not only tournament viable, but almost tournament defining. The Ardestria, the Atana, the Rabiyasu, the Malice, all of these fall within that category. So, with a vague equivalent in mind, we can then get right back into the reality of cold, hard numbers. Setting our low point at 40 billion ISK, our midpoint at 85 billion ISK, and our high point at 200 billion ISK. So, with that in mind, let's take a look back at the map and see how much of a bounty this is putting on the head of unaligned regions. So, first of all, let's take a look at Cloud Ring, which isn't unfortunately as neutral as I made it out to be in my previous video, that it seems to be quite a lot of Pandemic Horde influence in the region. But as an area with a lot of small groups who may be seen as easy targets, it's worth taking a look at. As you can see, the region holds 16 outposts, 12 of which are not under the control of Pandemic Horde, which gives this region a bounty of 480 billion ISK at the low, 1 trillion ISK at the mid, and 2 trillion ISK at the high, which really is nothing to sniff at. Moving on from this, we have Tinal, still occupied by the Foxtopus Coalition, which is home to 21 conquerable outposts, of which 15 are under control of the aforementioned coalition, which makes the region worth around 600 billion ISK at the low, 1.3 trillion at the mid, and 3 trillion at the high. Cloudring and Tinal, however, serve as simple appetizers when compared to the massive amount of infrastructure that is available to be mined in Fountain and Providence, two of the most well-developed regions in the game in terms of stations. Fountain specifically holds 45 conquerable outposts. This means that conquering and holding the region just before patch day is worth 1.8 trillion ISK at the low, 3.8 trillion ISK at the medium, and 9 trillion ISK at the high. And then, saving the best for last, we have Provident, a region which built many stations as a way of effectively boring anyone who is attacking it to death during Dominion, leading to it being the region with by far the most stations, holding 79 within the borders of Providence, and a further 8 more in North Catch, effectively putting a price tag of 3.5 trillion ISK at the low, 7.4 trillion ISK at the mid, and 17.4 trillion ISK at the high. To attempt to put that in some form of perspective, remember that BTAC R5, the biggest fight that has ever occurred in the history of EVE Online, cost 11 trillion ISK across both sides. This means that even if prices hold at the very bare minimum of around 40 billion ISK, holding Providence on patch day is still long term going to be worth around a third of what BTAC R5 cost. And if you were already looking for a reason to invade someone, I don't think you can find a juicier carrot than that. There are other factors involved other than ISK though, in why I think that a Goldrush war is particularly likely. The first being a lack of any large-scale content since the Tribute War, as a result of the larger coalition structure that has currently developed in order to facilitate the Industrial Cold War, which means that larger PvP-focused entities are going to be looking for something to occupy the summer months, as a stagnation in content in that way has proven fatal to many alliances in the past. And whilst normally a temporary invasion might be something that's hard to get line member buy-in for, the wealth on the table from these station changes is going to help justify any form of invasion of a neutral region for these stations. That said, I don't think it's going to lead to any form of great war between the major entities in the meta, and that comes down to two main reasons. The first of this is very simple economics of profit and loss, as two powers like the Red Swarm Federation and the Legacy Coalition going to war might cost in the region of 4 or 5 trillion ISK to even the winning side, which might not be recouped even if all the systems in question are taken and all stations sold. And the second reason is that of time. Large-scale wars tend to drag on for months, and if you're trying to do this just before patch day so that you can get those sweet faction citadels, you might not be able to take all of the territory and all of the stations that you need to get your maximum payout, leaving some spoils in the hands of a now hostile faction. And then even beyond that, you have the question of what you do with this vast tract of empty territory, as you'll now need to find someone to install in the area who can defend themselves against a very pissed off great power who is trying to reclaim their homeland, which isn't quite as big of a concern when you're looking at the smaller entities like Proviblock or Fountain Core, as the powers that surround them already know that they have no way of invading them back as a recourse for their actions. In fact, the only way that I can see the great powers coming to blows this summer is in neutral ground over who gets exactly what station within one of these neutral entities' territory. Like I said, however, this is just my interpretation of the political climate right now, and also my interpretation of what these changes are going to bring. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Or do you think I'm just quite frankly full of shit? Let me know in the comments or wherever you want to contact me. Also, to answer probably the most common question I've had over the past couple of weeks, I won't be doing a blow for blow of the anime war in the same way I did for the Winter War, and that's because I really prized the amount of neutrality that I could give my overview of that conflict, and whilst it wasn't perfect in that regard, I don't think I can even come close in a war that I'm helping to lead, in addition to the time constraints that would obviously put on me. But with that, fly smart and take care.